One hit center dry 1964 center. One, just one. The lowliest number in it. One. One becomes a plate of two, plate of meat, that's your feet, with your feet spitting two as well. Left and right, and you're right, you're kidding me, as in you kidding me, right? Which rhymes with nine, which splits into dog and moon. Dog and bone, that's the phone, and the moon's your balloon, but just platoon, which splits into two tunes. So now we're animated, mate. One becomes a plate of two, plate of meat, that's your feet split. One becomes a plate of two. One becomes a plate of one becomes a plate of two, plate of two, plate of two. One corner's like a Joe backseat, that's a taxi, and the taxi's got four wheels of steel, that's a deal, and the deal's got four parts to get line or bar, that's your heart, and the heart's got four chambers, and each chamber's got a Richard the Third, that's a word, and the word splits into syllables, three of them, but we're doing four, so add a syllable as there, four, moving on. One becomes a plate of two, plate of two, plate of two, or your feet. One becomes a plate of two, plate of two, one becomes a plate. One becomes a plate, one becomes. 8 corners on a Johnny Horner, that's a corner, I'm wearing all of them. 8 bits in a bite, and a bite holds a letter, and a letter holds a word, and a word holds a dog and bone. Oh, and again, the rhyme came back, that's recursion, bruv. The dog chased its own Chevy Chase, that's its face, and its face has 2 mince pies. Eyes, each eye has an iris was my auntie's name, and auntie rhymes with can't be, as in you can't be serious. But I am 8 of me now, all serious, in 3 dimensions. One becomes a plate 16 Anna Maria's, that's fires, and every fire's got a Jackie and Joan, that's a moan, and every moan's a groans, a Owen and Owens, a stones, a dog and bone. Phone again. The phone keeps coming back because the rhyme is recursive. The slang contains the original word that you started with before the split, before the mitosis, before the 1 became 16. 16's got a prime factor, 2 to the 4, 2 a first split, 2, 4 splits deep. Everything is still just 2, pretending to be 16. The way one cell pretends to be a body. Every cell's got the same DNA, every hit's got the same original hit. Split. But still one, wearing 16 masks in 16 positions, in 3 dimensions, rhyming with itself. One hit, center, dry. 16 back to 8, that's losing weight, losing your Calvin Klein, that's fine. Half the party left, but the ones who stayed are the prime positions, the corners, the structure, the bone beneath the door. One hit, center, dry. 16 back to 8, that's losing weight, losing your Calvin Klein, that's fine. 16 back to 8, that's losing weight, losing your Calvin Klein, that's fine. 16 back to 8, back to 8, back to 8, back 16 back to 8, 16 back 16 back to 8, 16 back to 8, back to 8, back to 8, back to 8, back to 8. One becomes a plate of 2, plate of meat. Lundy Sefeto. One becomes a plate of 2. One hit center, one hit center, one hit center, one hit. 16 back to 8, that's losing weight. Wait. 16 back to 8, that's losing weight. Wait. 16 back to 8, that's losing weight. 16 back to 8, that's losing weight. 16 back to 8, that's losing weight. Wait. 2 to the 4, 2 to the 4. 1, it's slang term. 17 back to 8, that's losing weight. 16 back to 8, that's losing weight. 16 back to L16, back to L16, back to L16, back to L. One hit, one. One becomes a plate of 2. 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 One hit. One hit. One. 16 back to 8. One becomes into 2. One becomes on to plate of 2. 16 back to 8. 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 One. 16 back to 8, that's losing weight. 1. 16 back to 8, that's losing weight. 1. one hit. 16 back to 8. 2 1. 16 back to 8. 16 back to 8. 16 back to 8. That's losing weight. 16 back to 8. One hit to do. 16 back to 8. 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 16 back to 8. 16 back to 8. 16 back to 8. Mine becomes a play of 2. 1 hit. Center. 1 hit. 16 back to 8. That's losing weight. Back to 8. 8 corners of the cube remain. 1 hit. Then in sphere be the KM. 16 back to 8. 16 back to 8. 16 back to 8. 16 to 16. 16 back to 8. 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 The swarm thin. 16 back to 8. 8 corners of the cube remain. 16 back. 16. Still the same tempo. Still 90 center. Still the same tempo. Still 90. 16 back to 8. Still, but there's always the cue. Just with extra voices. 16 back to 8. 16 back to 8. Which one? Which one? Which one? Which one? One becomes a plate of 2. 16 back.